Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Now, the drums are a very visual instrument because they are big and the motions required to make them produce a sound are very sort of obtuse. It's the arm stretched out on the ride cymbal. It's, going across the tom-toms of the fill. Compare that to a clarinet where the physical motions required to create sound are very much more acute. And so, because of that, a lot of drummers have developed a flair for showmanship. Some of them intentionally, some of them it just happened. Think of Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, very visible drummers. Think of Keith Moon. Think of John Bonham. Think of Neil Peart. So many of the drummers Carl Palmer, so many of the drummers who we know and love are instantly recognizable visually. I mean, look at the jazz world: Art Blakey, Max Roach, Billy Cobham, Tony Williams. You can sort of close your eyes and not only see them, but you can probably see their various drum sets that they used over the years. But one of the most widely recorded drummers is someone that you might not visually recognize, and maybe he's someone that you haven't even heard of. But even if you haven't heard of him, there's a very high likelihood that you have heard him because this man has played on literally thousands of records. And his name is Hal Blaine. Now, he was part of one of the most in-demand sort of groups of A-plus session musicians in the world, known as the Wrecking Crew. And they were based in LA, which by the 60s had really become the epicenter of the music industry. New York was in previous decades, but people wanted to move out to LA. People like Bill Putnam were building the most advanced studios in the world. It was where it's at. We talked about this in a different context a few streams ago. Now, Hal Blaine is someone who was incredibly reliable, and while there's some video of him playing, particularly in his later years, there's precious little of him playing when he was at his peak. But there he is with his Ludwig drum set behind him. That was his sort of standard gear that he would bring to his sessions. And when I say he played with everyone, I mean everyone. Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, Sonny and Cher. I mean, the list could go on and on forever. But Blaine was someone who was incredibly reliable, incredibly tasteful, and he sort of bridged the gap between jazz and rock drumming. Because, like most drummers, he came from the world of jazz. European classical music isn't known for incredibly complex percussion. Some of it is quite demanding, but it's really jazz that's ground zero for the drums, particularly the drum set. But he got booked for a lot of rock sessions, and he took the gigs and became known as someone who could be playing literally on Strangers in the Night one day and then on Pet Sounds the other day, all within the same sort of 2 year period. And the people that were in the Wrecking Crew around him really helped create the modern studio sound of the day. Now, as tastes change, a different generation of studio musicians came around in the 70s. People like, as I mentioned on another recent video, the guys from Toto, the Porcaro brothers, Steve Lukather, David Page, some of their friends, people like Larry Carlton, who himself a strong jazz background, and the list goes on. But the Wrecking Crew continued to have gigs in the 70s and 80s, even as the world of pop changed from one of the 60s to sort of the more harder rock and more jazz fusion, ironically, in the 70s. So even though the Wrecking Crew guys, most of them had a background in jazz, it was in the 70s when a lot of jazz fusion became very in vogue in pop music, and you get the sort of Larry Carltons of the world and the Steve Lukathers who can groove it out of the world. But Hal Blaine, I'm not sure if he's the most recorded drummer ever, but he may well be. He's certainly up there. And unlike the guys in Toto and a lot of the others who emerged in the 70s scene, Hal never really, he didn't join a well-known band. He didn't have a solo career, but everyone in the music industry knows him. Many have played with him, and he's considered one of the most rock-solid, reliable, dependable drummers of all time. And this would have been his birthday. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.